Good afternoon, dear friends. You are on the Military Reporter channel. We are still with you in a daily format studying the situation in Ukraine and on the front. Before you start watching, please subscribe to the channel and put a like, so more people will learn the truth. Attacks will continue, but no ground combat, says French President and Foreign Minister. European authorities stated that a temporary ceasefire would help assess how faithfully the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is fulfilling his obligations. Regarding Ukraine, President Zelensky's message, published in the past 12 hours, conveyed a similar sentiment. Zelensky proposed establishing a ceasefire in the air and at sea to stop bombings on energy infrastructure and other civilian targets. His plan, outlined in the message, aligns with the efforts of the United Kingdom and France rather than the United States. Despite frequent mentions of the US and former President Donald Trump in various discussions, this particular plan is driven by the UK and France. A few days ago, we reported that European politicians suggested Zelensky take the first step by offering a gesture of goodwill, proposing a ceasefire. If Russia rejects this proposal, it would allow European nations and the world to place blame on Russia, portraying them as unwilling to pursue peace, while keeping Zelensky's image intact. It is crucial to understand the difference between the conflict resolution plans proposed by the US and those proposed by the UK and France. The most significant distinction lies in their approach. The UK and France's plan suggests a partial ceasefire, meaning Ukraine would urge, or attempt to compel, Russia and European countries to halt attacks on energy infrastructure, seaports, and other strategic facilities. However, clashes along the combat line would continue. This approach benefits Ukraine, as a temporary halt to certain attacks would allow them to regroup, replenish losses, and restock supplies while combat persists in designated areas. Conversely, the US plan calls for an immediate and complete ceasefire, ending all types of attacks in the air, sea, and along the front lines. However, Ukraine opposes this version, as it would leave them in a less favorable strategic position, while Russia would gain stronger leverage in negotiations. These differences highlight the complexity of the situation, and it remains to be seen how events will unfold. Meanwhile, another major development has been reported. Next week, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the French President will travel to Washington to meet with Donald Trump once again. At the same time, reports indicate that the United States has suspended the delivery of military cargo to Ukraine, adding another layer of uncertainty to the unfolding situation. To Ukraine through the logistics hub at the Jonki Airport in Poland, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk confirmed. Furthermore, according to information we have today, this morning the Daily Mail stated that the United States of America ordered the United Kingdom to stop providing Ukraine with intelligence information. I'll remind you that the United States of America stopped providing Ukrainians with this information a day or two ago, and now they are trying to force the United Kingdom to do the same. As we can see, the situation is very difficult. On the other hand, we also received reports that rolling Starlink outages have begun in Ukraine. Ukrainian military personnel are recording regular shutdowns of Starlink satellite data terminals along the entire front line, which began almost immediately after Zelensky's visit to the White House. So, we see that something is happening, once again these political games, and we see that some players are playing this game in a dirty way. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. First, we are going to talk about the southern direction, where the Russians continue tightening the noose around the Ukrainian positions along the most important artery, the road No. 7. Today, according to different maps, the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, managed to improve their positions in the territory of the settlement named Zhuravka. Let's take a look at the map to see what changed. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of March 2025. Let's start even earlier. This is the situation on the 2nd of March 2025. This territory was marked as contested. On the 3rd of March, we got information that the Russians managed to capture this territory. On the 4th of March, we received the first report from pro-Russian sources that the Russians managed to improve their positions even further, and by the beginning of the 5th of March, the Russians secured the farms on the western side of the settlement. Furthermore, according to most of the map sources, pro-Russian resources, neutral resources, and pro-Ukrainian resources, the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over these farms and the small village called Malaya Lochnia. So, this is the situation by the end of the 4th of March. As you can see, this pocket was under complete Ukrainian control, but by the beginning of the 5th of March, this territory was completely secured. We still haven't received anything to confirm this, but if it happened, most likely, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. Now we understand what the Russians are planning to do next. Most likely, they will move in the eastern direction towards the railways between the settlements of Malaya village and Cossack village. If the Russians are able to cut the railways and the road between the two settlements, then the Ukrainians in the north would be caught in a cauldron. However, when the Russians start these movements, most likely the Ukrainians will start retreating first towards the settlement of Chu, then through the forest in the direction of Cossack village, and then even further towards Suja. So, we believe that we can start counting the days for the Ukrainians in the bridgehead area of Malaya Lochnia, where the Russians continue their offensive. Now let's discuss the southern part. Today, according to defense sources, the Russians also managed to secure the settlement of Kurilovka. The Russians, mainly natural and pro-Russian resources, confirm this information today. We understand that the next target for the Russians is to move further in the western direction. Currently, the primary target, the main priority for the Russians, is to establish complete control over the settlement of Malayo and this big forest. If the Russians are able to take this territory under complete control, they will be able to shorten the distance to the main supply lines and the main supply artery that goes between the settlements of Suja and Sumy. We are talking about this area. So, the situation, as you can see, is worsening for the armed forces of Ukraine, and obviously, before the beginning of the real negotiation process, most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this area. Otherwise, they would be caught in a cauldron and most likely destroyed. Now, let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the Hari direction today. Neutral sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions along the border and take control of a military object that used to be a border facility where, before the war, the Russians and Ukrainians were transferring across the border in this area. During the previous several days, we've been receiving videos from this area published by Ukrainian sites. For example, yesterday, based on the video published by the Ukrainian site, we adjusted the most northern part of these facilities, and today, neutral mappers confirmed additional progress on the ground. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the northern direction. Today, according to information we have from pro-Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the forest to the north of the settlement named Zapad. This forest was recaptured by the Ukrainians as a result of a counteroffensive operation, and this is exactly what we were talking about several days ago. If you remember, a few days ago, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting map with changes showing that the Ukrainians carried out a successful counterattack in the direction of the forest, in the direction of this territory between the river of Razol and the settlements of Lyman Pershii and Sinkivka. We talked about how the main target and purpose of this Ukrainian counterattack was to reduce Russian logistical capabilities and disrupt the connections between the western and eastern banks of the river Raskol. We expected that the Ukrainians would most likely try to counterattack Russian positions in the area of Zapadnaya and in the vicinity of DNA. As you can see, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians carried out this counteroffensive operation during the previous several days, and they managed to restore control in the vicinity of Zapadnaya. This is a very important position and area for the Ukrainians, and most likely they will do everything they can to prevent the Russians from continuing their offensive there. Another important area is the southern Kupiansk direction. Today, we received very important updates, and we have adjusted the map. As you can see, for example, this is the map by the end of the 4th of March 2025, and today, by the beginning of the 5th of March, we got a significant number of indications that confirm Russian control over this dense network of fortifications. This is a complete disaster for the Ukrainians, because now the Russians have very powerful and strong positions on the Ukrainian side of the River Gibbet, and from this area, most likely, the Russians are planning to continue advancing further in the direction of the city of Lyman. As you can see, when talking about this part, there are no defense barriers in front of the Russians, and this is the greatest disaster for the Ukrainians. Now let's move further. Several sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions in the central part of the city of Chasiv Yar. As of now, there are no indications to confirm this. Pro-Ukrainian sources reported that, in the Pokrovsk direction, the Ukrainians, as a result of a decisive counterattack, managed to restore control completely over the settlement of Uspanivka. I'll remind you that several weeks ago, we discussed and concluded that most likely the Russians would sooner or later be forced to fall back from this area, because for now, this area has just one purpose: to secure the northeastern flank for those Russian forces that are currently trying to advance in the direction of the border between Donetsk and the river and the region of Dnipro. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your like, and have a good day.